Rev up your engines. All right, here's a 12-year-old F-150. The guy's the original owner. He's getting noises that nobody can figure out. At least they say they can't. The Ford dealer can't figure out. So let's take it for a ride first and get a general idea where the noise is coming from. It's a funky noise that's made when you're accelerating, especially uphill. If at least it'll make it going up this hill here. I heard it. I heard it. You can really hear it now. All right, we got to figure out what it is. Now, I definitely heard the noise coming from under here, so let's do a physical check first. So we're under. Well, we're going to do the old hammer test. Here's the most obvious thing, is there's a catalytic converter on each side. So let's whack them. Now that one sounds pretty solid. Let's move to the other side. Get under here. Here's the driver's side cat. Now, for a second there, I thought I heard a sound, so let's start it up. Now, if you notice, this is four-wheel drive. I kind of have a feeling the noise is coming from the transmission or the transfer case. So, the Noise Master. Now, as you can see, it's got 6 channels. There's 6 plugs and 6 sensors. So, we're going to clamp number 1 on the transfer case and number 2 on the transmission. Nice solid clamps there. Now, they're both connected. Number 1 on a transfer case, number 2 on a transmission. So, we can check them by going between 1 and 2 while we're driving. So the sound will travel up through the device and we'll try to replicate the noise. We can switch it back and forth. Now we're going to listen to the noise while we drive. Here's the headphones. There we go. And that's when we're on number 2. I kind of figured it was a transmission to begin with, but this is all-wheel drive, so you got a transmission, you got a transfer case, but you saw that it went to the red. The red shows sound too. And when I stuck the microphone of the camera into the earphones, you could hear that. So not the greatest news for the owner. Well, let's get out my scan tool and see what the transmission data is anyway. This was an $89 tool from Amazon, Noise Master. Definitely worth the 89 bucks. 6 channels. You can find any noise. And the cool thing is, not only do you hear it with headphones, but you get to see it with the LEDs, green, yellow, red. The only transmission thing we find is here. We have a failure of contact plate general circuit. Now, if you get enough vibration from bearing wear, that can happen to the electronics. Even though it says transfer case, most of the noise is coming from the transmission, but that vibration can feed through and make the circuits go weird on a transfer case too. The computer knows there's something electronic going on in the entire transmission system, so let's go to the transmission system. It doesn't have any codes in the transmission. But it does slip a little bit while you're driving. You can feel it slip, it'll have a little jerky shift. So we'll live data. We'll select them all, and we'll take it for another road test. Oh, shut up, you stupid seatbelt. So here you go with the live data. While he's driving it, we'll check stuff out. And you can see all this data is really close. There isn't much slippage. You can feel a little shifting roughness, but a Ford this old, you can't expect that. And you can see the turbine shaft and the actual shaft speed, they're pretty close here. There's just a tiny bit of slippage. This one's a little bit higher. Now, as I said, it's a Ford, it's got a lot of miles on it. Pretty much typical. It's got wear, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. The noise though is an internal noise, probably a shaft bearing inside the transmission starting to wear. Okay, so now we know it's in a tranny. A decent remanufactured transmission starts at about $2,600. You're gonna pay somebody $600–800 to install it. You can get used ones for $500 or even less. That, of course, is a gamble. But with the mileage on this and the age, it shifts good enough, and it's making that noise. Really sounds like a bearing noise. It's in the transmission. You never know how long it'll last. This is now a knock-around vehicle. This isn't a primary driving vehicle. I've seen people have these for another 8 years. They don't put much mileage on them. They can still drive them around. What the heck? The owner really doesn't feel like spending $3,500 to $4,500 for a reman, or gamble with a $500 used transmission that you have no idea what the mileage is, since it doesn't even have any transmission code, still working fine, starting to get some bearing noise. He's gonna see how long the thing lasts rather than put a bunch of money into it. Now, he took it to a Ford dealer. They said they can't find out what's wrong. It took me 15 minutes to find out what was wrong. So it kind of shows you, people don't even care these days when they work on your car. I do. This is why I'm making these videos. Buy one of these $89 sound detectors. You can find any noise. 6 channels. You can put 6 clamps all over if you're not sure where the noise is to pinpoint it. And then, if you do go to a mechanic, plug it on the one that made the noise. It says, here's the noise. What's going on? And they can't argue when they hear and see the lights flashing with the noise. You can't beat sound and sight. Like I said, it took me 15 minutes. The Ford dealer said, oh, we don't hear anything. We don't see anything wrong. It amazes me these days. Anything can be done by yourself if you want to get a little tool like that. It also works good on houses. You got noises, sounds, pipe. You stick it all over the place and find the noises. You can put it on your wife. See how loud she is. All right, a 21-year-old Impala. Now, the guy got it free from Florida from a relative for nothing. So let's see, was it worth it? Or is it a endless money pit? Well, it does make odd noises. Now, it did that in park. Even in park, he'd rev it up, and he noticed when it did that, it shifted a lot worse. Well, I can tell by that noise that it's transmission related. And on these things, a lot of times it's the torque converter starting to go out. A lot of times you can dump a quart of transmission fluid out, put a quart of Lucas transmission slip fix in. That can help it somewhat. You're certainly not going to rebuild a transmission on a free car like this that's 21 years old. It'd be 3-4 times what the car's worth. So that's one thing they can easily try. Now, considering he got the car for free, he's had it about 6 years and he's thrown about $2 grand into it, so he can't complain. That's why I said, you know, you're not going to rebuild the transmission. It's not very rusted at all, which is a good thing. If it spent its life in Massachusetts where its tags are now, it'd probably be in a junkyard. It would be rusted out. Now, actually, it has a very dependable engine. These 3400 engines are excellent engines. The transmissions, well, they leave quite a bit to be desired. That's the main thing that kills these, is the transmissions go out and people are like, I'm not gonna put any money into that. He changes the engine oil every 3,000 miles, runs perfectly fine. For an old car, and nothing's going to run perfectly. What he was worried about is the noise and the shifting on the transmission. So let's hook up the computer and check the transmission out. So here we go. Working pretty fast, even though it's a 21-year-old car. And we'll do a smart scan. We got some body control module codes and a powertrain. We'll start with the BCM. Key in ignition circuit high. These notorious as they age, the ignition switches get a little bit weak, but it's still got plenty enough power to start. So I wouldn't worry about that. The engine oil pressure switch circuit, theft deterrent, fuel enable signal lost, maximum adaptation, and long shift. Okay, this is the one that has to do with the transmission. The other two, the switches get a little bit weak. It starts and runs, who cares? And the theft deterrent, fuel enable, that has to probably do with the ignition switch, but it starts good enough. You don't worry about all this glitchy stuff on an old car like this, especially a GM. But this one, that's the one we're interested in. Oh, we'll check this out. We'll look at the freeze frame. Okay, now this happened when the engine load was at 42% at 1,866 RPMs, going 17.4 miles an hour. It was going at a slower speed. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't give you as much information as a modern car, but I'm assuming this probably happened when it was accelerating and probably going uphill, because he said that's when it has the problem. Basically, it comes down to this. Your car shifts by pressure differentials. As they get worn, the computer's got to raise the pressure to make them shift. And eventually, they won't shift at all because it'll be so worn, it can't build up enough pressure to make the stupid thing shift. It's not bad. Like I said, if you took a quart out, Lucas and I slip in, a lot of times that'll help because of the age of this thing. It's 21 years old and it's a GM product. It's got 150,000 miles. I would never, ever advise anybody to drop the pan, change the filter and fluid, or flush it out, because then it might slip and not even move down the road. You get a car for free and it's still going 5-6 years later, hey, be happy it's still going. But if you want to try, the only thing I advise is take out a quart, put a quart of Lucas anti-slip and see if it makes it any better. The reason it's had that excessive line pressure is because it's trying to compensate for internal wear. People might think, oh, it's an automatic transmission, but they still have automatic clutches. Just like a regular clutch, only they're done automatically. They will wear out, and when they wear out, either build the transmission or get a rebuilt transmission. And on something like this, like I said, it's not worth the money. It's not a collector's item. You got the car for nothing. Yeah, it's from Florida, so it doesn't have a rusted frame, but still, you don't put that kind of money into an old car like this. It'd be foolhardy. Now we're going to take it for a spin. We're going to shift it manually with the machine. We're going up. We're smooth there. Let's go down. It went down. We'll go up again. Now it's gone up and it's pretty smooth. Now this is bypassing all of the self-shifting mechanisms. You can see it shifting pretty smooth when I bypass it. What I'm doing is commanding it. When I command it, you can see it's extremely smooth. That bypasses everything. Now, I doubt if you want to be driving down the road, hooking this thing up and shifting it manually. It just shows that the system itself, the automated part, is worn. It will shift fine when you command it by yourself, but it's so worn that the computer's confused that when to shift up, when to shift down, and then at certain times it'll hesitate. See, now it's too low, so we'll go down. There we go. Feel it?
Wild.
There. See? It did it okay when you do it mechanically. Now the owner told me it's been doing this for 8,000 or 10,000 miles. I said, hey, it's drivable. If he wants to try something, here's how I would drive it if it had any problems. You're in first gear, then when you want to shift, put it in second gear. When you want to shift, put it in third gear. And when you want it in fourth gear, put it in drive. I was basically doing the same thing, except I was doing it electronically with my little machine to see how it goes. You can drive it that way. I have had customers with these GMs, and they drive them that way for 5 years. And they say, you know, she's pretty good that way. And if you're lazy, leave it in drive, right? If it starts acting up, then immediately shift it down into third or second gear, and then drive it that way. Then it won't be doing the hesitating that it was doing with the transmission going out. And since you're shifting it manually, hey, it should do a really good job shifting anyways, and you don't have to rebuild the transmission, which of course it would be foolhardy in an old car like this that you got for nothing and have been driving for 5-6 years. It still runs good enough to go down the road and get you where you're going. I wouldn't trust it to go from here to California, no. It might go up going up the Rockies, because he said the worst problem is if you're accelerating uphill, and that's almost always transmission problems. In this case, we know it is. But it's the transmission building the line pressure up with the computer, because it wants to try to make it shift right, but it can't because it's too worn. But when you shift it with the gear shift lever, that's physical. You're physically changing it, so you don't have to worry about all the electronic crap. So we got an old Impala, 21 years old. It still runs good enough. You're definitely not going to be foolhardy to rebuild the transmission in it. If you want to shift it manually, it still might last for years. It's a knock-around car. You don't want to put a lot of money in it, but not burning oil. Runs good enough. The transmission, yeah, it's getting weak, but it's a good knock-around car. Somebody gives you one that's in this shape, hey, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You got it for nothing, and it did come from Florida, so the bottom's not all rusted out. But, you know, I don't advise paying any kind of money for one of these cars. But if you can get one dirt cheap enough, and it still goes down the road, it can be a good beater car. Nothing to do with the Impala that I learned to drive on when I was a kid with a full-size V8. Other than it still has the Impala logo on it. Their water-based paint doesn't hold up all that well. But what the heck, it still goes down the road. Don't put a bunch of money in it and tell you, oh, I can fix that for $500 or blah, blah, blah. They can't. It would need a total rebuild. But it goes good enough. It's a decent beater car. That's what this car's good for. You got it for free. He's had it for years. It still goes down the road. Why not? If it finally does go out, you junk the car. He tried changing the filter and fluid. It made absolutely no difference because it's just wearing out internally. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.